Deep in the shadowed forests where sunlight rarely kisses the ground, something ancient watches. Hikers vanish, livestock is torn apart, and eerie howls echo through the misty night. Locals whisper of hulking figures glimpsed between trees, silent, swift, and terrifying. Claw marks gouge bark too high for any known predator, and massive footprints sink into untouched snow. Whatever stalks these woods doesn't belong in any field guide. It moves like myth, strikes like a beast, and leaves behind a trail of fear and questions that no one dares to answer. In the vast expanse of Elder Grove Wilderness, an area locally known as the Grove, 3 seasoned hunters embarked on what would become their final expedition in September 1998. Gordon Weaver, Elijah Barnes, and Tanner Briggs had set out with high spirits and loaded rifles, eager to track elk during the opening week of rifle season. The Elder Grove Wilderness, spanning over 1 million acres of rugged terrain, had always presented its challenges: grizzly bear encounters, treacherous ravines, and profound isolation. But nothing could have prepared them for what awaited in those dense woods. The Grove had a storied history of strange occurrences. Local Native American tribes had long warned settlers about a tall creature that walked on 2 legs, hiding among the trees and watching humans from afar. Most dismissed these tales as folklore meant to keep outsiders away from sacred hunting grounds. Gordon, Elijah, and Tanner, all experienced outdoorsmen with decades of hunting experience between them, certainly paid no mind to such stories when they ventured into the wilderness that crisp autumn morning. The trio had selected a remote campsite near Ashwood River, approximately 7 miles from the nearest ranger station. Their first day had been uneventful, with Elijah managing to spot some promising elk tracks heading northwest. As night fell, they settled around their campfire, reviewing their plans for the following day's hunt. None of them noticed the unusual silence that had descended over the forest. No insects chirping, no nocturnal animals stirring in the underbrush. According to later reports, it was on the second day that Gordon first noticed they were being followed. Something large moved through the trees parallel to their hiking path, always maintaining distance but never fully revealing itself. Gordon initially suspected a black bear or perhaps a moose, but the deliberate way it shadowed them raised his concerns. When large branches began snapping approximately 50 yards behind them, Elijah suggested they make camp early and keep their rifles close. That night, temperatures dropped unexpectedly, and a light rain began to fall. The men retreated to their tents after securing their provisions in bear-proof containers hung from tree branches. Around midnight, according to Gordon's later testimony, they were awakened by a powerful stench that permeated the campsite. Described as a mixture of wet dog, rotting vegetation, and something unmistakably musky and primal. The official search for the missing hunters began 7 days later when they failed to return as scheduled. A park ranger discovered Gordon Weaver stumbling along a service road, his clothes torn and soaked with blood that wasn't his own. The 61-year-old hunter had sustained a dislocated shoulder, multiple lacerations, and showed signs of severe dehydration and exposure. Most disturbing to first responders was his psychological state. He appeared traumatized beyond rational explanation, repeatedly murmuring about something that wasn't a bear watching them from the trees. When rescue crews finally located the devastated campsite in a ravine 2 miles from where Gordon had been found, they encountered a scene that defied conventional explanation. The tents had been ripped apart with force that suggested something far stronger than wild animals. Blood spatter analysis indicated violence originating from multiple points around the camp. Most puzzling to the forensic team were deep humanoid footprints embedded in the mud, measuring nearly 18 inches in length and displaying 5 distinct toe impressions, yet clearly not belonging to any of the hunters. The physical evidence became more disturbing as the search expanded. Elijah's rifle, a high-caliber weapon designed to take down large game, had been snapped in half as though it were a plastic toy. Tanner's remains were discovered scattered across a 40-foot radius, with forensic analysis indicating the body had been dismembered with tremendous force rather than with claws or teeth. Parts of his torso were found nearly 30 feet up in a tree, suggesting they had been thrown there with incredible strength. The Elder Grove Department of Fish, Wildlife and Parks officially classified the incident as a likely aggressive grizzly encounter, though several investigators privately expressed doubts. The claw marks found on trees surrounding the campsite were inconsistent with bear behavior, starting too high and displaying a pattern that suggested fingers rather than paws. The incident was quickly closed to public inquiry, with authorities citing respect for the family's privacy. Gordon Weaver never returned to hunting or even casual hiking after the incident. He sold his collection of outdoor equipment and moved from his longtime Montana home to a small apartment in Ashwood, where he reportedly installed multiple locks on his doors and kept his blinds permanently drawn. Though he refused all formal interviews about the incident, locals in Ashwood reported that on rare occasions when Gordon visited the neighborhood bar and consumed too much whiskey, he would speak of the attack in hushed tones. According to bartender Nathan Caldwell, Gordon once confided that the creature had watched them for nearly 48 hours before making its move. It had stood upright on two legs, towering over 7 feet tall, with broad shoulders covered in dark, matted fur. Most haunting was Gordon's insistence that the creature had displayed reasoning and purpose, systematically cutting off their escape routes and targeting Elijah first, because he carried the most powerful weapon. While the official record maintained the grizzly bear explanation, residents of nearby communities began reporting an unusual number of missing hikers in the years following the incident. Park rangers quietly adjusted patrol patterns to focus on the area where the attack occurred, though no official explanation was ever provided for this operational change. Gordon Weaver passed away in 2007 from natural causes, taking most details of what truly happened that September night to his grave. However, his final written statement, sealed until after his death and only viewed by immediate family, reportedly contained a single sentence. "It wasn't just watching us, it was studying us." The Elder Grove Wilderness remains a popular destination for hunters and hikers, though local guides now routinely advise visitors to avoid certain ravines after sunset and to report any unusual silence in the forest immediately. The official story remains unchanged in government records, but the deeply worn paths around the incident site have long been abandoned by wildlife that seemingly knows better than to trespass where something else now claims dominion. The remote reaches of the Russian taiga near the Vorya River had long been considered a harsh but manageable environment for the logging crews assigned there by Soviet authorities. In the winter of 1976, as brutal cold gripped the region with temperatures plummeting to -40 degrees, 3 men, Lev Chernov, Pyotr Yegorov, and Dmitry Slavin, were stationed at outpost KB-14, a small but functional logging camp situated approximately 30 kilometers from the nearest village. The Vorya River region had been the subject of local folklore for generations. Indigenous Evenki tribes avoided certain valleys and ridges, claiming they belonged to the forest giant, a creature they called Chuchuna, that walked upright like a man but stood twice as tall and was covered in thick, matted fur. Soviet officials had dismissed such tales as primitive superstition, focusing instead on extracting the area's valuable timber resources. The 3 men at KB-14 were experienced woodsmen who had survived multiple Siberian winters. Their assignment was straightforward: maintain equipment, continue limited logging operations when weather permitted, and radio weekly reports to regional headquarters in Krasnoyarsk. For the first 6 weeks of their winter deployment, communications proceeded normally, with Lev Chernov, the senior member, reporting adequate conditions and steady progress during their scheduled Sunday transmissions. On January 18, 1976, the expected radio communication from KB-14 never came. Regional headquarters attempted to establish contact throughout the day without success. Authorities initially attributed the silence to equipment malfunction, common enough in the extreme cold. After a second missed transmission the following week, a rescue team was organized, though their departure was delayed by a severe blizzard that rendered helicopter travel impossible and ground routes impassable. When the rescue party finally reached KB-14 on January 29th, they discovered a scene that defied conventional explanation. The main cabin had been partially destroyed by fire, with snow melted in a wide radius around the remnants. As they approached, team members noted unusual tracks circling the perimeter. Barefoot humanoid impressions measuring approximately 56 centimeters in length, pressed deep into the frozen ground, despite the hardened winter soil that would normally resist such impression. The bodies of Dmitry Slavin and Pyotr Yegorov were recovered in conditions that perplexed even experienced investigators. Slavin's body was found 10 meters from the cabin with a completely crushed ribcage. The sternum actually impacted into his spine, suggesting compression force far beyond what any known predator in the region could generate. Yegorov's remains were discovered impaled on a broken pine trunk, raised nearly 3 meters off the ground. The tree itself had been snapped halfway up its 30-meter height, requiring a force that investigators estimated would exceed several tons. Most concerning to the rescue team was the absence of Lev Chernov's body. A trail of blood led away from the cabin toward the northeast, continuing for approximately 2 kilometers before abruptly ending at a steep cliffside overlooking the frozen Vorya River. No body was ever recovered despite extensive searching in the spring thaw, though fragments of a Soviet-issue winter coat were found scattered across a wide area, some caught in tree branches at improbable heights. The official report filed with Moscow headquarters attributed the incident to a rare aggressive bear encounter combined with an accidental fire caused by equipment malfunction. Weather conditions were listed as a contributing factor, suggesting the men had become disoriented in a blizzard while attempting to confront a predator. The case was quickly closed, the outpost abandoned, and logging operations in the immediate area suspended indefinitely without explanation. Years later, documents emerged from previously classified KGB archives that cast doubt on the official narrative. Internal communications referenced large bipedal evidence and contained notes about subject believed to be Leshy, a reference to a mythological forest spirit in Slavic folklore. Field notes from the investigation team mentioned finding masses of dark hair caught in splintered wood around the camp, samples of which were collected but never formally analyzed. Most compelling was a partial transcript recovered from the outpost's radio, evidently recorded automatically when Lev had attempted transmission during the attack. The quality was poor, but audio analysts identified sounds inconsistent with any known animal in the region. Deep, guttural vocalizations with patterns suggesting primitive speech rather than animal calls. Local authorities in post-Soviet Russia have consistently discouraged exploration of the area, citing environmental concerns and unstable terrain. Satellite imagery from the early 2000s showed the old KB-14 site had never been redeveloped, with the surrounding forest reclaiming the clearing where the outpost once stood. The lone access road had been officially decommissioned. However, local hunters reported it was now blocked by unusually arranged fallen trees that appeared to have been deliberately placed rather than naturally fallen. Residents of the nearest village, Verkhnaya Vorya, continued to avoid the area, particularly in winter months. Elder residents warned against traveling in the direction of the old logging camp, especially at night when strange howls could reportedly be heard echoing across the snow-covered landscape. These sounds, described as neither wolf nor bear but something uniquely unsettling, seemed to emanate from the densest parts of the forest, where even the hardiest local hunters refused to venture. Regional forestry officials maintain that the KB-14 incident was definitively explained decades ago, pointing to the official Soviet conclusion of bear attack. However, they have repeatedly denied requests from international researchers to conduct scientific expeditions in the area, citing ongoing environmental restoration projects that require minimal human interference. To this day, no official memorial marks the site where Pyotr Yegorov and Dmitry Slavin met their end, and Lev Chernov remains listed in Russian records simply as missing in the line of duty, presumed deceased. The Greywood Hills National Park, spanning 554 square miles of heather moorland in northern England, had long been known for its haunting beauty and desolate expanses. In July 2003, what began as an urban exploration adventure for three friends would become one of the region's most perplexing modern mysteries, one that local authorities would struggle to explain through conventional means. Thomas Flint, Georgina Reeds, and Liam Cartwright were experienced urban explorers from Leeds who had documented abandoned buildings across northern England for their small but dedicated online following. Their latest target was a decommissioned Royal Air Force radar station near Fylingdales, constructed during the Cold War and abandoned in the late 1980s. The facility had been partially dismantled, but several underground chambers reportedly remained intact, drawing the interest of military history enthusiasts and urban explorers alike. The location had an uncomfortable history, even before the military installation. Local folklore spoke of black dogs and strange figures glimpsed at twilight across the moors. Victorian-era writings referenced an upright beast encountered by moorland travelers. Such tales were common across rural Britain and typically dismissed as superstition by modern visitors, including the three explorers who arrived at the site on July 15, 2003. Following standard safety protocols, Thomas uploaded their planned route to a survivalist forum where they regularly shared their explorations. The group intended to camp for 3 nights, with the abandoned radar station as their primary objective on the second day. When they failed to make their scheduled update post 3 days later, forum members initially assumed it was due to poor mobile reception in the remote area. It wasn't until July 22nd that genuine concern arose. Thomas's father, Martin Flint, a retired West Yorkshire police officer, contacted local authorities after receiving no response to multiple calls to his son's mobile phone. His professional background lent immediate credibility to the missing persons report, triggering a search operation that same afternoon. Search teams located the explorers' campsite the following morning in a small valley approximately 2 miles from the abandoned radar facility. The scene immediately concerned veteran search and rescue personnel. The tent had not simply collapsed. Its aluminum poles were bent at impossible angles, with one investigator comparing them to pipe cleaners twisted by a child. Food rations remained in sealed packages, suggesting the group hadn't departed voluntarily. Most troubling was the discovery of Thomas's high-end camera with its memory card missing, despite the case being found intact. On the second day of the search operation, a cadaver dog alerted handlers to an area of disturbed peat moss nearly half a mile from the campsite. Excavation revealed Liam Cartwright's body buried under approximately 18 inches of soil and vegetation. The medical examiner would later determine his skull had been subjected to catastrophic blunt force trauma, with fragments embedded in brain tissue indicating an impact of extraordinary power. Soil samples from around the burial site contain no metal fragments or tool marks, suggesting the grave had been dug without conventional implements. Georgina Reed's was never found, though her damaged mobile phone was recovered from a small stream nearly a mile from the campsite. The device's internal memory yielded no relevant media files, though its condition suggested it had sustained significant physical stress. Investigators noted signs consistent with a panicked escape, including trampled vegetation and shredded fabric fragments. Forensic analysis of the surrounding area indicated the presence of an unknown large mammal based on trace hair and spoor patterns. Most puzzling to investigators were several strands of thick, dark hair recovered from Liam's jacket and the surrounding soil. Initial analysis suggested primate origin, though not matching any species native to Britain. The samples were sent to specialized laboratories for further testing, but results were never publicly disclosed. Unconfirmed reports from a laboratory technician indicated the DNA sequencing showed unusual patterns that defied straightforward classification. The Graywood Hills National Park Police officially classified the case as a homicide investigation, though no suspects were ever identified. The coroner's report on Liam Cartwright listed the cause of death as extensive blunt force trauma, likely from falling debris, despite search teams noting an absence of cliffs, large trees, or other potential sources of falling objects in the immediate vicinity. The case remains officially unsolved. Thomas Flint's remains were never located despite one of the most extensive search operations in the region's history. His status remains missing, presumed deceased, in official records. Georgina Reed's was declared legally dead in 2010 after 7 years without contact, though her body has never been recovered. In the years following the incident, local residents reported an increase in unusual occurrences around the moor, including livestock disappearances and strange vocalizations after sunset. The abandoned radar station was demolished completely in 2007, ostensibly as part of a habitat restoration project, though some locals questioned the timing and urgency of the demolition. Vernon Attlee, owner of the Wheatsheaf pub in nearby Egton Bridge, later recounted that Thomas had visited his establishment the evening before the group ventured onto the moors. According to Attlee, Thomas had jokingly referenced the local legends, specifically mentioning a werewolf that walks like a man, after hearing tales from older patrons. Attlee remembered Thomas's casual dismissal of such stories, a confidence that seemed tragically misplaced in retrospect. The Graywood Hills National Park Authority subsequently revised its safety guidelines, emphasizing the importance of regular check-ins and discouraging exploration of abandoned structures without proper permissions. However, they made no specific reference to the Flint Reed's Cartwright incident, referring only to past incidents involving inadequately prepared visitors. The moors keep their secrets, but something moves through the heather when darkness falls, something that some believe has been there long before humans claimed to understand the natural world. The Silvercrest Mountains of northeastern Oregon had long been known for their rugged beauty, dense conifer forests, and isolated valleys perfect for ranching families seeking solitude. The Doyle family ranch, established in 1952 by Wallace Doyle, sat on nearly 400 acres of land at the end of an unmarked dirt road, 10 miles from the nearest neighbor. By May 1984, the ranch was operated by siblings Martin, Kyle, and Samantha Doyle, who had inherited the property following their parents' passing in a car accident 3 years prior. At 26, Samantha was the youngest of the three, with Martin at 34 and Kyle at 32. They ran a modest but successful cattle operation, supplemented by selective logging on the eastern portion of their property. The Doyles were known in the nearby town of Enterprise as hard-working private people who rarely sought assistance and valued their independence, qualities that would ultimately complicate the investigation into what happened at their remote homestead. The first unusual occurrences began in late April 1984, though they were only reported retroactively after the subsequent tragedy. According to Samantha's later statements to Wallowa County Sheriff's deputies, the family initially noticed disturbed cattle that refused to graze in the northwestern pasture. By early May, they had lost 3 calves to what they presumed was predation, though the manner of killing perplexed even Martin, who had spent his entire life in ranching country. Sheriff's reports documented Samantha's description of finding the first calf with its rib cage apparently crushed and partially consumed, yet with none of the typical signs of cougar or bear activity. No drag marks were present, and the kill hadn't been covered with debris, as was typical of large predator behavior in the region. Most troubling to the family was the discovery of unusual footprints around the kill site, described as barefoot human tracks, but measuring nearly 17 inches in length. On the evening of May 28th, the family's dogs began exhibiting extreme distress, refusing to leave the porch and growling toward the tree line approximately 200 yards from the main house. Kyle reported hearing what he described as wood-knocking sounds from multiple directions, followed by deep, resonant vocalizations that resembled neither elk bugling nor any other wildlife known to inhabit the area. The sounds continued intermittently through the night, always seeming to originate from different locations around the property. According to Samantha's official statement, Martin decided to investigate the northern fence line on the morning of June 3rd, after discovering another slaughtered calf and several fence posts that appeared to have been deliberately uprooted. Armed with a lever-action Winchester rifle and a handheld radio, he promised to check in hourly as he made his inspection. His final transmission, received at approximately 10:45 a.m., mentioned finding something large bedded down in the brush near the property boundary. He was never heard from again. When Martin missed 2 scheduled radio check-ins, Kyle set out to search for his brother at approximately 2:30 p.m., carrying his Remington shotgun and additional ammunition. He instructed Samantha to contact the sheriff if neither returned by sunset. At approximately 4:15 p.m., Samantha reported hearing 3 shotgun blasts in rapid succession from the direction Kyle had headed, followed by what she described as a scream unlike anything I've ever heard. Not animal, not human, something in between. After waiting an additional hour with growing concern, Samantha armed herself with her father's revolver and proceeded toward the location of the gunshots. According to her statement, she discovered Martin's mutilated remains suspended in the branches of a Douglas fir approximately 15 feet above the ground. The coroner would later determine that Martin had suffered catastrophic trauma, including a severed spine and multiple compound fractures, suggesting his body had been subjected to tremendous force before being placed in the tree. Samantha found evidence of Kyle's presence: spent shotgun shells, his dropped flashlight, and a trail of blood leading deeper into the forest, but no sign of her second brother. She reported hearing heavy bipedal movement through the underbrush nearby and fled back to the ranch house, where she barricaded herself inside and used the landline to contact authorities at 7:23 p.m. The Wallowa County Sheriff's Department arrived at the property at 9:40 p.m. with 4 deputies, finding Samantha in a severe state of shock. A preliminary search that evening located Martin's body as described, but darkness and safety concerns postponed a full-scale search until morning. By first light, a team including Oregon State police officers, local search and rescue volunteers, and wildlife officials began a systematic search for Kyle Doyle. Despite extensive efforts over the following week, including helicopter surveys and cadaver dogs, Kyle's body was never recovered. Blood trail analysis confirmed it was his blood leading away from the scene, with the volume suggesting a significant, but not necessarily fatal, injury. Most puzzling to investigators were the tracks found alongside the blood trail, described in the official report as resembling a barefoot human but of impossible size and depth of impression. The sheriff's official statement attributed the incident to possible cougar or black bear activity, noting that predator behaviors could become unpredictable during drought conditions, such as those affecting the region that spring. However, internal communications later obtained through public records requests revealed significant disagreement among the investigating team, with wildlife officials specifically noting that the damage to Martin's body was inconsistent with any known predator attack pattern. Samantha Doyle sold the ranch property 3 months later and relocated to Boise, Idaho, where she refused all media requests and eventually changed her surname. The property remained unoccupied for nearly a decade before being purchased by an investment company and subdivided into hunting parcels. In a single recorded interview with a court-appointed therapist during the probate process for her brother's estates, Samantha allegedly provided additional details that never appeared in official reports. According to the therapist's confidential notes, which were inadvertently included in court filings before being sealed, Samantha described seeing something moving between the trees as she fled the scene, something that walked upright on 2 legs, but stood nearly 8 feet tall, with arms that hung below its knees. The notes quoted her as saying, "It had hands, not paws or claws. It had hands like yours and mine, only twice the size." Local hunters reported unusual findings in the years following the incident, including broken trees with snapped trunks 15 feet above ground level and large shelters of woven branches hidden in remote ravines. Forest Service employees documented unusually large barefoot tracks on multiple occasions, but attributed them to pranks or misidentified bear tracks. The case officially remains classified as a wildlife attack, with 1 confirmed fatality and 1 missing person presumed deceased. Locally, however, longtime residents still refer to the northwestern section of the former Doyle property as the Forbidden Zone, and hunting guides refuse to lead expeditions into the densely forested valleys where something may still be watching from the shadows. The Valdara Hollow, nestled in the heart of the Spanish Pyrenees near the French border, had long attracted adventure seekers drawn to its pristine alpine meadows, dense forests, and dramatic mountain vistas. In the summer of 2015, the valley's reputation for serene beauty would be forever altered by events that local authorities struggled to explain through conventional means. André Calvet, Luc Morel, and Mireille Vasseur, 3 longtime friends from Toulouse, France, had planned their hiking retreat for months. All experienced mountaineers in their mid-30s, they had traversed challenging terrain across Europe, but the Valdara Hollow represented their first venture into this remote corner of the Pyrenees. Their reservation at Cabana del Bosque, a rustic stone cabin situated at 1,800 meters elevation and accessible only by a 3-hour hike from the nearest road, promised the isolation they sought for their weekend escape. The Valdara Hollow had accumulated centuries of folklore involving strange creatures in its remote reaches. Local shepherds spoke of La Bestia, an elusive, massive bipedal creature said to inhabit the highest, most isolated ridgelines. Regional tourist materials diplomatically referred to these tales as colorful local mythology, but longtime residents treated the legends with noticeable reverence. Several villages maintained curious traditions involving offerings left at forest boundaries during specific lunar phases. André, Luc, and Mireille arrived in the valley town of Vielha on Thursday, June 18, 2015. According to later testimony from hostel owner Ramon Puigcercós, the three friends spent the evening studying topographical maps and planning their routes. When Puigcercós mentioned the region's reputation for strange occurrences, suggesting they avoid certain unmarked trails above the tree line, Luke reportedly dismissed the warnings as quaint local superstition designed to keep tourists on designated paths. One eyewitness, who later chose to remain anonymous, reported seeing the trio departing from the village's edge early Friday morning, describing them as relaxed and well-equipped for mountain hiking. Their planned itinerary involved reaching the cabin by mid-afternoon, exploring surrounding ridges on Saturday, and returning to Vielha by Sunday afternoon. The last confirmed sighting came from shepherd Jordi Barcelo, who encountered them approximately 2 hours into their journey and noted they appeared to be following the established trail toward their destination. Later that evening, a text message sent from Luke's phone to a colleague in Toulouse raised concerns. Though the message was brief, it hinted at fear and confusion, with Luke writing that something was outside the cabin and that it moved like a man, not like an animal. The message ended abruptly, and Luke did not respond to any further attempts at contact. When the group failed to return by Sunday evening as scheduled, Puigcercós contacted local authorities. The Grup de Rescat de Montaña, mountain rescue group, of the Mossos d'Esquadra initiated a search early Monday morning, focusing on the cabin and surrounding trails. What they discovered at around 8:43 a.m. would become the subject of ongoing debate within law enforcement and scientific communities. The cabin's sturdy oak door, designed to withstand harsh mountain winters, had been torn completely from its iron hinges. Responding officers initially suspected vandals or perhaps a bear, though the pattern of damage perplexed wildlife experts. Rather than showing signs of an animal attempting to claw or push its way inside, the door appeared to have been pulled outward with tremendous force, splintering the frame and bending the metal reinforcements. The interior of the cabin revealed signs of a desperate struggle. Furniture was overturned, personal belongings scattered, and most disturbing, a trail of blood led from the main room toward the stone fireplace. There, partially stuffed into the chimney cavity, in what investigators described as an intentional placement, was Luke Morel's body. Autopsy findings indicated catastrophic cervical fractures and evidence that he had been forcibly compressed into the confined space post-mortem. Approximately half a kilometer from the cabin, search teams located Mireille Vasseur's body in a small clearing. The medical examiner determined her neck had been broken with such force that the cervical vertebrae were nearly completely separated. The official report noted the injury pattern was inconsistent with a fall or conventional attack, requiring torque strength exceeding human capability. The search for André Calvet continued throughout the day, with helicopter support and canine units scouring the surrounding terrain. At approximately 5:30 p.m., a search team located him 2 kilometers south of the cabin, wandering barefoot through a shallow stream. He was severely hypothermic, nonverbal, and exhibited signs of extreme psychological trauma. When transported to Hospital de Vielha, medical staff documented unusual bruising on his arms and torso, with distinct patterns suggesting he had been gripped by hands of extraordinary size. The official investigation faced immediate challenges. André remained in a profound state of shock, unable or unwilling to communicate coherently about the events at the cabin. Physical evidence defied conventional explanation. The cabin door alone would have required force far beyond human capability to damage as observed. Most perplexing were large, barefoot humanoid tracks found in mud patches near the cabin, measuring approximately 54 centimeters in length, with clear anatomical details, including 5 distinct toes. After 3 days of hospitalization, André began speaking, though his account was fragmented and initially dismissed as trauma-induced delusion. According to the attending psychiatrist's notes, he described being awoken by Mireille's screams as something massive and covered in dark fur reached through the cabin window. He recalled Luc attempting to barricade the door while urging André and Mireille to escape through the rear window. André's memory became unclear after witnessing something impossibly strong tear the door outward, followed by sounds he could not explain, described not as animalistic or human, but resembling a kind of language that felt entirely wrong. The Mossos d'Esquadra officially classified the incident as an animal attack of undetermined origin, with public statements suggesting an unusually aggressive bear. This explanation failed to address numerous inconsistencies, including the absence of claw marks, the selective nature of the attack, and the method of killing that wildlife experts confirmed was inconsistent with ursine behavior. Regional wildlife authorities had no record of any bear large enough to inflict such damage, with the largest specimen tracked in the area weighing approximately 250 kilograms, far too small to account for the destruction observed. Following his release from medical care, André Calvet returned to France and reportedly underwent extensive therapy. He declined all media interviews and eventually relocated to New Zealand, a move associates described as an attempt to put as much distance as possible between himself and the Pyrenees. In his only public statement, made through his attorney, he requested privacy and stated that some things should remain in the mountains. Local response to the incident proved telling. While official tourism materials continued promoting the Valdara Hollow's natural beauty, residents quietly adjusted their behaviors. Grievers Lake, stretching over 1,160 square kilometers in northern Alberta, Canada, had long been a paradise for fishermen and outdoor enthusiasts. Its pristine waters, abundant walleye, and northern pike drew recreational visitors from across the province, while its surrounding forests provided habitat for diverse wildlife and opportunities for hunting. In the summer of 1961, the tranquil beauty of this remote landscape would become the backdrop for one of the region's most perplexing and disturbing incidents. The Rourke brothers, Dale, Barry, and Kenneth, were fixtures on Grievers Lake, having established their annual fishing tradition in 1953. Local residents in the small community of Canuso described the trio as experienced outdoorsmen who knew the lake and surrounding wilderness intimately. Dale, the eldest at 39, operated a hardware store in Edmonton. Barry, 35, worked as a civil engineer for the provincial government, while Kenneth, the youngest at 32, taught mathematics at a secondary school in Calgary. Their family had deep roots in Alberta, with their grandfather having established one of the first successful cattle operations near what would later become Banff National Park. The brothers maintained a small but well-built cabin on the north shore of Grievers Lake, approximately 6 miles east of the Grouard Peninsula, and accessible only by boat or a challenging hike through dense forest. This isolation appealed to the brothers, who valued their annual 2-week retreat from civilization as a chance to reconnect with each other and the wilderness. The events of July 1961 began unremarkably. According to accounts from shopkeepers in Canuso, where the brothers purchased supplies before heading to their cabin, the trio appeared in good spirits and methodically gathered provisions for their planned 14-day stay. Clayton Walsh, owner of the local general store, recalled their excitement about reports of exceptional walleye fishing that season and their purchase of new lure, types specifically designed for the lake's conditions. The brothers launched their boat, a sturdy 16-foot cedar strip craft with a small outboard motor, from the public dock at Canuso on July 8th. Several witnesses later confirmed seeing them heading northeast across the lake, following their usual route toward their cabin. Weather conditions were optimal: clear skies, light winds, and temperatures in the mid-70s Fahrenheit. Perfect conditions for both travel and fishing. The established pattern of the brothers' annual retreats typically involved radio silence, with no communication expected until their return 2 weeks later. This intentional disconnection from the outside world, a chance to escape telephones and responsibilities, meant that no immediate alarm was raised when contact was lost. The first indication of trouble came only when Kenneth Rourke was discovered by Harold Blackwater, who operated the small ferry service across the channel at the lake's eastern end. According to Blackwater's statement to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, he spotted a figure stumbling along the shoreline early on the morning of July 19th, apparently disoriented and in distress. Upon approaching, he recognized Kenneth Rourke, though the man's condition shocked him. His clothing was torn and bloodied, his left arm hung at an unnatural angle, and he appeared severely dehydrated and in a state of psychological shock. Blackwater transported Kenneth to the nearest medical facility in Grievers Lake, where Dr. Margaret Thornton documented his injuries: a dislocated shoulder, multiple lacerations, severe dehydration, and most concerning, what she described as a psychological trauma state unlike any I've previously encountered in 20 years of medical practice. Kenneth's medical charts noted that he repeatedly murmured about something in the trees and became extremely agitated when darkness fell, insisting that the hospital windows be covered. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police launched a search operation the following morning, focusing on the North Shore area where the Rourke cabin was located. Constable James McKinnon led the initial search party, arriving at the cabin site by midday. His official report described a scene of extraordinary disarray. The cabin door had been torn from its hinges with such force that the surrounding log frame was splintered. Furniture inside was destroyed, and most concerning, significant bloodstains were found on the floor and walls, with spatter patterns suggesting violent impact. Approximately 50 meters from the cabin, search teams located an overturned canoe belonging to the brothers. The craft showed unusual damage. The gunnels were splintered on both sides as though the vessel had been gripped and crushed. Nearby trees exhibited strange markings, deep scarifications approximately 7 feet above ground level, inconsistent with bear activity, which typically marked trees at lower heights. Despite an extensive search involving aircraft, tracking dogs, and dozens of volunteers, Dale Rourke's body was never recovered. Barry's remains were located 3 days into the search, partially submerged in a small cove approximately 1 mile from the cabin. The autopsy findings were sealed by provincial authorities, but leaked information from the medical examiner's office indicated injuries inconsistent with drowning or animal attack. Specifically, a completely shattered sternum and ribs that had been compressed with force, estimated to exceed 1,000 pounds of pressure. Kenneth Rourke remained hospitalized for 11 days before being released to the care of his sister in Edmonton. His formal statement to the RCMP was brief and, according to investigating officers, delivered with a flat affect, suggesting continued psychological distress. He recounted that on their 3rd night at the cabin, the brothers had heard unusual bipedal movement in the surrounding forest, accompanied by what he described as wood-knocking sounds from multiple directions simultaneously. The following day, the brothers discovered large humanoid footprints around their property, barefoot impressions measuring approximately 20 inches in length. Dale had photographed these tracks, though the camera was never recovered. That evening, according to Kenneth's account, something began circling the cabin after sunset. occasionally testing the door and windows with what seemed like deliberate, intelligent probing rather than random animal behavior. On what would be their final night together, Kenneth reported that Dale had gone to secure their canoe after hearing splashing at the shoreline. Minutes later, they heard a scream unlike anything natural, followed by silence. Barry grabbed his hunting rifle and rushed outside while Kenneth retrieved a flashlight. His statement indicated that he witnessed something tall and massive, dragging Dale into the tree line with incredible speed. Barry fired several shots before being struck by something that sent him flying nearly 20 feet. Kenneth's memories after this point were fragmented, though he recalled running into the forest, pursued by heavy footsteps, before eventually making his way eastward along the shoreline. Kenneth Rourke never returned to Griever's Lake. He sold the family cabin to a local logging company for a fraction of its value, stipulating in the sale contract that the structure be demolished rather than repurposed. He left his teaching position in Calgary and relocated to Halifax, Nova Scotia, where the proximity to the ocean and distance from forests reportedly provided some psychological comfort.